Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But here's what he discovered that most leaders refuse to face. Your greatest strength as a leader isn't your polished public persona. It's your ability to own and integrate the dark parts of yourself that you've been hiding. The shadow side you've been running from. It contains the very power you need to become an authentic, influential leader. Today, I'm going to reveal Jung's revolutionary framework for shadow work, why every great leader must face their darkness, and the exact process you can start using today to transform your hidden weaknesses into your greatest leadership assets. But before we dive into Jung's shadow work methodology, I need you to do something crucial right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share will challenge everything you think you know about leadership development. This isn't feel-good motivation. This is deep psychological work that can fundamentally transform how you lead, influence, and create impact. If you're ready to do the inner work that separates truly great leaders from the rest, you cannot afford to miss what's coming next. We're going to explore 4 transformative sections today. First, what Jung's shadow actually is and why it's the missing piece in most leadership development. Second, the exact shadow work process that Jung developed and how to apply it to your leadership challenges. Third, the specific shadow patterns that sabotage leaders and how to identify them in yourself. And finally, a practical daily shadow integration practice that you can start implementing immediately to become a more authentic and powerful leader. Let me start with a story that perfectly illustrates what we're dealing with. In 1909, Carl Jung was working with a successful businessman who came to him with a peculiar problem. This man was known in his industry as ethical, principled, and fair, a model leader. But he was plagued by recurring dreams where he was cheating, lying, and manipulating people. He was terrified that these dreams revealed his true nature and that he was secretly a terrible person. Jung's insight was revolutionary. These dreams weren't revealing this man's true nature, they were showing him the parts of himself he had disowned and rejected. In his conscious effort to be perfectly ethical, he had pushed all capacity for strategic thinking, negotiation, and even healthy self-interest into his unconscious mind. The result? He was actually less effective as a leader because he couldn't access these necessary qualities when he needed them. This is the shadow, not evil or darkness in the moral sense, but the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or hidden because they don't fit our idealized self-image. Jung discovered that we all have a shadow, and the more we try to be perfect, the larger and more powerful our shadow becomes. Here's the crucial insight for leaders. Your shadow contains not just your weaknesses, but also your disowned strengths. The qualities you've rejected because they seemed inappropriate or unprofessional often contain exactly the power you need to lead effectively. Think about it. How many leaders do you know who are so focused on being nice that they can't make tough decisions? So committed to being rational that they ignore their intuition? So determined to be humble that they can't own their expertise and authority? Jung identified 4 key characteristics of the shadow. First, the shadow is personal and universal. Everyone has one, but the specific content varies based on your upbringing, culture, and personal experiences. What you've learned to hide or reject creates your unique shadow pattern. Second, the shadow is compensatory. The more extreme your conscious persona, the more extreme your shadow becomes. The perfect leader often has a shadow full of chaos and rebellion. The tough leader often has a shadow full of vulnerability and sensitivity. Third, the shadow is projected. We tend to see our own shadow qualities in others, especially in people who trigger strong emotional reactions in us. The qualities you most dislike in other leaders are often clues to your own shadow content. Fourth, the shadow is energetic. It's not just psychological, it's a source of power and vitality. When you integrate your shadow, you don't just become more self-aware, you become more dynamic, creative, and influential. Jung discovered that the path to psychological wholeness What he called individuation requires facing and integrating the shadow. For leaders, this isn't just personal development, it's essential for authentic influence and sustainable success. Here's why this matters so much for leadership. When you reject parts of yourself, you lose access to their energy and wisdom. You become one-dimensional, predictable, and limited in your responses to complex situations. But when you own and integrate your shadow, you become more flexible, more creative, and more genuinely powerful. The leaders who have the greatest impact aren't those who have eliminated their darkness. They're those who have learned to work with it consciously and constructively. Now let's dive into Jung's actual methodology for shadow work. This isn't abstract theory. This is a practical process that you can begin implementing immediately. Jung developed this approach through decades of clinical work and his own personal journey of self-discovery. Stage 1. Recognition. Identifying your shadow. The first stage is learning to recognize your shadow. Jung identified several reliable methods for shadow detection. The projection method. Pay attention to people who trigger strong negative reactions in you, especially other leaders. What specific qualities do they display that you find most irritating or offensive? Write these down. Now ask yourself, how might I have this same quality, even in a small way? This is often your shadow speaking. For example, if you're triggered by leaders who seem arrogant, ask yourself, where might I be arrogant? Where do I hide my own sense of superiority or expertise? You might discover that your commitment to humility has caused you to reject healthy confidence and self-advocacy. The dreams and fantasies method. Jung believed that shadow content often appears in dreams as same-sex figures who embody qualities you reject. Pay attention to recurring dream characters or fantasy figures. What qualities do they represent? How might these qualities serve you if integrated consciously? The energy depletion method. Notice when you feel drained or exhausted in your leadership role. Often, this happens when you're working against your shadow rather than with it. If being always positive exhausts you, perhaps your shadow contains necessary skepticism or realism. If being always rational drains you, perhaps your shadow contains important emotional intelligence. The overcompensation method. Look for areas where you work extremely hard to maintain a particular image or quality. Overcompensation often indicates shadow material. If you work very hard to be seen as collaborative, your shadow might contain necessary assertiveness or independence. Stage 2. Dialogue. Engaging your shadow once you've identified shadow content. The next stage is engaging with it directly. Jung developed several techniques for shadow dialogue. Active imagination. Set aside time to have an internal conversation with the part of yourself you've rejected. If you've identified a selfish shadow, for example, have a dialogue with that part. Ask it, what do you want? What are you trying to protect? How might you serve my leadership? This isn't about acting on every shadow impulse. It's about understanding the legitimate needs and wisdom your shadow contains. Journaling dialogue. Write conversations between your conscious persona and your shadow. Let your shadow voice express itself fully without judgment. You might be surprised by the insights and energy that emerge. Body awareness. Shadow content often manifests as physical tension or energy. Notice where you hold tension when you're trying to maintain your leadership persona. Breathe into those areas and ask what they're trying to tell you. Stage 3. Integration. Conscious collaboration. The goal isn't to eliminate the shadow or to be controlled by it. It's to develop a conscious, collaborative relationship with these disowned parts of yourself. Conscious choice. Instead of automatically rejecting shadow impulses, pause and ask, what is this part of me trying to accomplish? How might I honor this need in a constructive way? For example, if your shadow contains anger that you've rejected because good leaders don't get angry, you might learn to use that anger as information about boundary violations or injustices that need addressing. Graduated expression. Start expressing shadow qualities in small, safe ways. If your shadow contains playfulness that you've rejected as unprofessional, Find appropriate ways to bring more likeness to your leadership. If your shadow contains toughness you've rejected as mean, practice setting clearer boundaries. Shadow mentoring. Find mentors or role models who embody integrated versions of your shadow qualities. Study how they express these qualities constructively and authentically. Stage 4. Embodiment. Living as a whole leader, the final stage is embodying your integrated shadow in your daily leadership practice. This means situational flexibility, using different aspects of yourself depending on what the situation requires. Sometimes leadership requires your nurturing side, sometimes your tough side, sometimes your visionary side, sometimes your practical side. Authentic presence. No longer hiding parts of yourself or working to maintain a perfect image. This doesn't mean being inappropriate. It means being genuinely human and multidimensional. Shadow awareness. Continuing to monitor for new shadow material as you grow and evolve as a leader. Shadow work isn't a one-time process. It's an ongoing practice of self-awareness and integration. Jung emphasized that shadow work is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. The goal is not to eliminate your darkness, but to develop a conscious relationship with it so that it serves rather than sabotages your leadership. Through decades of working with leaders, certain shadow patterns emerge repeatedly. Understanding these patterns can help you identify your own shadow content more quickly and accurately. The nice leader's shadow. Hidden aggression and control. Many leaders pride themselves on being nice, collaborative, and supportive. But often, their shadow contains significant aggression, control needs, and judgment that gets expressed indirectly. Signs of this shadow pattern. Passive-aggressive behavior when things don't go your way. Feeling frustrated when people don't appreciate your niceness. Difficulty making tough decisions that might upset people. Tendency to manipulate through guilt or emotional pressure. Exhaustion from constantly managing your image. The integration opportunity. Learning to express your needs, boundaries, and opinions directly. Recognizing that healthy aggression and appropriate control are necessary leadership qualities. The tough leader's shadow. Hidden vulnerability and sensitivity. Leaders who pride themselves on being strong, decisive, and unemotional often have shadows full of vulnerability, sensitivity, and need for connection. Signs of this shadow pattern. Discomfort with emotional conversations or team members' feelings. Tendency to dismiss soft skills as unimportant. Difficulty asking for help or admitting uncertainty. Overworking to prove your strength and capability. Relationships that feel superficial or transactional. The integration opportunity. Learning to access and express your emotional intelligence. Recognizing that vulnerability and sensitivity can enhance rather than undermine your leadership effectiveness. The rational leader's shadow. Hidden intuition and emotion. Leaders who pride themselves on being logical, data-driven, and objective often have shadows full of intuition, emotion, and creative insight. Signs of this shadow pattern. Dismissing gut feelings or hunches as unreliable. Difficulty inspiring or motivating others emotionally. Tendency to overanalyze decisions and miss opportunities. Discomfort with ambiguity or situations that can't be quantified. Team members who see you as cold or disconnected. The integration opportunity. Learning to trust and integrate your intuitive wisdom. Recognizing that emotion and intuition provide valuable information for leadership decisions. The humble leader's shadow. Hidden grandiosity and ambition. Leaders who pride themselves on being humble, modest, and selfless often have shadows full of grandiosity, ambition, and desire for recognition. Signs of this shadow pattern. Difficulty owning your expertise and accomplishments. Tendency to downplay your contributions or deflect praise. Feeling resentful when others get recognition you deserve. Difficulty setting ambitious goals or vision. Team members who wish you would step up more boldly. The integration opportunity. Learning to own your power and expertise appropriately. Recognizing that healthy ambition and self-advocacy serve your mission and team. The visionary leader's shadow. hidden practicality and skepticism. Leaders who pride themselves on being innovative, optimistic, and visionary often have shadows full of practicality, skepticism, and attention to limitations. Signs of this shadow pattern: difficulty with implementation and follow-through, tendency to dismiss practical concerns as negative thinking, frustration when reality doesn't match your vision, team members who feel overwhelmed by constant change, projects that start strong but fail in execution. The integration opportunity: learning to integrate practical wisdom and healthy skepticism. Recognizing that attention to limitations and obstacles can strengthen rather than weaken your vision. The collaborative leader's shadow: hidden independence and selfishness. Leaders who pride themselves on being collaborative, inclusive, and team-oriented often have shadows full of independence, self-focus, and desire for autonomy. Signs of this shadow pattern: exhaustion from constant collaboration and consensus building, difficulty making decisions without extensive input, resentment when your own needs aren't considered, tendency to lose your own voice in group settings, team members who wish you would be more decisive. The integration opportunity: learning to balance collaboration with appropriate independence. Recognizing that healthy self-focus and autonomy can enhance your ability to serve others. The authentic leader's shadow: hidden performance and image management. Even leaders who pride themselves on authenticity often have shadows containing performance, image management, and strategic presentation. Signs of this shadow pattern: judgment of leaders who seem inauthentic or political, difficulty adapting your communication style to different audiences, tendency to share too much personal information inappropriately, resistance to feedback about your impact on others, team members who sometimes need you to be more professional. The integration opportunity: learning that appropriate performance and image management can serve your authentic mission. Recognizing that strategic communication is a leadership skill, not a betrayal of authenticity. Modern neuroscience has validated many of Jung's insights about the shadow and provided additional understanding of why shadow work is so powerful for leaders. The default mode network and self-concept. Recent research on the brain's default mode network shows that we spend significant mental energy maintaining our self-concept and filtering out information that contradicts our self-image. This is essentially what Jung described as shadow projection. We literally don't see parts of ourselves that don't fit our conscious identity. Shadow work helps rewire these neural patterns, allowing for more flexible and accurate self-perception. Leaders who do shadow work show increased activity in brain regions associated with self-awareness and emotional regulation. Neuroplasticity and integration. The brain's capacity for neuroplasticity means that shadow integration isn't just psychological, it's neurological. When you consciously practice integrating shadow qualities, you're literally building new neural pathways that allow for more flexible responses to leadership challenges. Studies show that leaders who engage in shadow work demonstrate increased emotional regulation under stress, greater cognitive flexibility in problem solving, enhanced empathy and perspective-taking abilities, improved decision-making in complex situations, reduced burnout, and increased resilience. The stress response and shadow activation under stress. We tend to regress to our most familiar patterns, often our conscious persona or our unconscious shadow. Leaders who haven't integrated their shadow often swing between these extremes under pressure, becoming either rigidly controlled or unexpectedly reactive. Shadow integration creates what neuroscientists call response flexibility, the ability to access a full range of responses depending on what the situation requires. Mirror neurons and authentic presence. Mirror neurons help us unconsciously pick up on others' emotional states and authenticity. When leaders are hiding or rejecting parts of themselves, others sense this incongruence at a neurological level, even if they can't articulate it. Leaders who have integrated their shadow show greater neural coherence alignment between their conscious intentions and unconscious patterns. This coherence is picked up by others' mirror neurons, creating a sense of trustworthiness and authentic presence. Now let's get practical. Here are specific exercises you can start using today to begin your shadow work journey. Exercise 1. The Leadership Trigger Audit for the next week. Keep a trigger journal. Every time you have a strong emotional reaction to another leader, whether positive or negative, write down who triggered you and in what context. What specific behavior or quality triggered you? What emotion you felt? Anger, envy, disgust, fear, etc. What this might reveal about your own shadow. At the end of the week, look for patterns. The qualities that most trigger you are often your shadow speaking. Exercise 2. The Energy Mapping Exercise. Create 2 lists. 1. Leadership activities that energize you. 2. Leadership activities that drain you. For the draining activities, ask yourself, what part of me am I rejecting or fighting against when I do this? Often, energy depletion comes from working against your shadow rather than with it. For example, if networking drains you, you might discover that you're rejecting your natural introversion or your need for deeper, more meaningful connections. Exercise 3. The Shadow Dialogue Practice. Choose one shadow quality you've identified. Set aside 15 minutes for a written dialogue between your conscious leader self and this shadow aspect. Start with shadow quality. I've been rejecting you because ... single quotes. Let the shadow respond. I'm here because you need ... Continue the dialogue until you understand what this shadow quality is trying to provide or protect. Exercise 4. The Opposite Day Experiment for 1 day. Consciously experiment with expressing the opposite of your usual leadership style in small, appropriate ways. If you're usually decisive, practice asking more questions. If you're usually collaborative, practice making some independent decisions. If you're usually serious, practice bringing more lightness. If you're usually supportive, practice giving more direct feedback. Notice what happens internally and how others respond. Exercise 5. The Leadership Hero and Villain Analysis. Think of a leader you most admire and a leader you most dislike. Write down their specific qualities. Often, your hero embodies your conscious ideals while your villain embodies your shadow projections. Ask yourself, how might I have small amounts of my villain's negative qualities? How might my hero's positive qualities be overdeveloped in me? What would balanced integration of both sets of qualities look like? Exercise 6. The Body Wisdom Check-In before important leadership interactions. Do a quick body scan. Where am I holding tension? What is my body trying to tell me? What part of myself am I trying to control or hide? How can I bring more of my whole self to this interaction? Exercise 7. The Shadow Mentor Visualization. Imagine a wise mentor who embodies the integrated version of your shadow qualities. In your mind, have a conversation with this mentor about a current leadership challenge. What advice would they give? How would they handle the situation differently than your usual approach? Shadow work isn't just personal development. It has practical applications in every aspect of leadership. Let's explore how to apply these principles in different contexts. Shadow work in team dynamics. Teams often develop collective shadows qualities that the entire team rejects or avoids. Common team shadows include conflict in teams that pride themselves on harmony, competition in teams that emphasize collaboration, emotion in teams that pride themselves on rationality, hierarchy in teams that emphasize equality. As a leader, you can help your team integrate their collective shadow by naming and normalizing the rejected qualities, creating safe spaces for shadow expression, modeling shadow integration yourself, addressing team projections and scapegoating. Shadow work and organizational culture. Organizations also have shadows aspects of human nature or business reality that they refuse to acknowledge. Examples include power dynamics in flat organizations, self-interest in mission-driven organizations, emotion in rational organizations, failure in success-oriented organizations. Leaders who understand organizational shadow can create more realistic and sustainable cultures, Address underground dynamics that sabotage official values. Integrate necessary but rejected organizational qualities. Prevent shadow eruptions that damage culture and performance. Shadow work in decision-making. Many leadership decisions fail because they're made from a one-dimensional perspective that excludes shadow wisdom. Shadow integrated decision-making involves acknowledging multiple perspectives within yourself, consulting both your rational and intuitive wisdom, considering both optimistic and pessimistic scenarios, balancing idealism with realism, including both collaborative and independent input. Shadow work in communication. Shadow integration dramatically improves leadership communication by increasing authenticity and presence, reducing defensive reactions, improving emotional intelligence, enhancing persuasive ability, creating deeper connection and trust. Shadow work in crisis leadership. Crises often activate both individual and collective shadows. Leaders who have done shadow work are better equipped to remain centered under extreme pressure, access a full range of responses, help others integrate their crisis-activated shadows, make decisions from wholeness rather than reactivity, lead with both strength and vulnerability as needed. Shadow work isn't a destination, it's a lifelong journey of becoming increasingly whole and authentic as a leader. Understanding the stages of this journey can help you navigate it more effectively. Stage 1. Unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know about your shadow. You're operating from a limited range of responses and wondering why certain leadership challenges keep recurring. Stage 2. Conscious incompetence. You begin to recognize your shadow patterns, but don't yet know how to work with them effectively. This stage can be uncomfortable as you become aware of your limitations and projections. Stage 3. Conscious competence. You develop skills for recognizing and integrating shadow material. You can catch yourself in shadow projections and make conscious choices about how to respond to triggers. Stage 4. Unconscious competence. Shadow integration becomes natural and automatic. You operate from a place of wholeness without having to think about it constantly. Stage 5. Conscious teaching. You can help others recognize and integrate their own shadows. You become a model of integrated leadership and can guide others on their journey. The key insight is that each stage brings its own gifts and challenges. Even experienced shadow workers continue to discover new layers of their unconscious patterns. The most important thing about shadow work is to begin. Here's how you can start your practice today. Week 1. Recognition. Begin the trigger journal. Complete the energy mapping exercise. Identify one clear shadow pattern. Week 2. Dialogue. Practice shadow dialogue daily. Try the opposite day experiment. Begin body awareness check-ins. Week 3. Integration. Start expressing shadow qualities in small, appropriate ways. Practice shadow integrated decision-making. Seek feedback on your leadership presence. Week 4. Embodiment. Integrate shadow work into your daily leadership practice. Share your insights with trusted colleagues or mentors. Plan for ongoing shadow work development. Remember, shadow work is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. The goal is not to eliminate your darkness, but to develop a conscious collaborative relationship with all parts of yourself. Carl Jung's greatest insight was that we cannot become who we are meant to be by rejecting parts of ourselves. For leaders, this truth is especially crucial. Your shadow doesn't contain your weakness, it contains your disowned power. The qualities you've rejected often hold the very energy and wisdom you need to lead with greater authenticity, influence, and impact. The leaders who change the world aren't those who have eliminated their darkness. They're those who have learned to work with their whole selves consciously and constructively. They've stopped trying to be perfect and started becoming complete. Your shadow work journey starts today. Begin with one exercise, one moment of honest self-reflection, one willingness to see yourself more completely. The world needs leaders who are brave enough to face their own darkness so they can bring their full light to the challenges we face. If this exploration of Jung's shadow work resonated with you, Hit that like button and share it with another leader who's ready to do the deep work. Subscribe for more insights into the psychology of authentic leadership and personal transformation. Remember, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Your shadow isn't your enemy, it's your ally waiting to be discovered. Start today. Start small, but start. Your most authentic and powerful leadership is waiting on the other side of this work.